Hey everyone, you're listening to Everything with Easton, and I'm your host, Easton Cook. Now, if you're like me and you start reading the Bible, there are many, many times when you stop and you're like, I just read the same sentence over and over and over again, and I have no idea what I read because the Bible gets so boring. Now, I know as a Christian pod, it feels almost sinful and wrong for me to say that the Bible gets boring. I feel like I should be here saying, hey, the Bible's great. Every single word, every single sentence. Oh my gosh, I feel God. It's incredible. It's the best thing ever. But that's just not the truth. Let's be real. All right, you try and read this book, and if you're watching on YouTube, by the way, I'm holding up a Bible. You try and read this book, and sometimes it gets kind of thick. It gets kind of boring, and that's okay. Because for an example, just to let you know, so I'm trying to read through Genesis, right? I'm trying to read a little bit every day. Been slacking a bit here and there, but I'm trying just to dedicate, if I've got 24 hours in a day, just trying to dedicate, 15 minutes to God within that 24 hours. And I got to chapter 5 of Genesis. And it gets into Adam's descendants all the way to Noah. Let me read you just a little bit from this. All right, this is chapter 5. Listen to this. This is the book of the generations of Adam when God created man, and it goes on. Let's go to, how about verse 6. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan had lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Now, here's the deal. I have a feeling I've got a decent amount of my listeners that probably just kind of actually just turned my podcast off, probably unsubscribed and was like, you know what, never mind. I can't listen to that. It's another second. Y'all, it was hard reading that. I'm just going to be 100% honest. I read that, didn't feel God. Not going to lie. It was just more like a, holy cow, I got to get through this. And I probably mispronounced most of those names. It was difficult. But this is where the first point of the day comes in. Remember, we're going down to 3 points. I'm going to give you the first one right now. And that is, your life has an expiration date. That's right. From this chapter 5, I wanted to find something. I wanted to know what God was trying to tell me. And I was like, this is so boring. I'm reading a name I can't pronounce. And then I'm getting into, let's see. I got to do some math here. He lived 65 years and then 800 after that. So that means 865 years, and then he died. I finally, once I really truly wanted to understand what I was reading, I started to notice a pattern, and I think you might have as well if you stuck with me this long. And that is, and then he died, and then he died, and then he died. Over and over and over, that same sentence is read. And I cut it off, by the way. You still had plenty of other verses where it was going through different names, harder names that I cannot pronounce. And it would end with, and then he died, and then he died, and then he died. And so my point number 1 is that you have an expiration date, because I prayed for a pattern. I prayed to understand. I was like, God, please help me get through this. And God delivered. Because as I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, if your life was written in a book, all right, if someone took a book and they said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and write from your birth to your death, I'm going to write everything in between. And they wrote a whole book about you. The ending would say, and then he died, and then she died, for every single one of us. There's no getting around it. There's no paying people off. There's nothing. You may prolong it. That's all you're doing, is prolonging it. Because at the end of your journey, death. And this is not meant to be a bleak podcast. This is not meant to be one of those that you listen to and you're like, ugh, I feel worse about life. No, instead what I'm saying is, no matter what you do, you have an expiration date. So you have something to do. You must live this life to the fullest because this is a stupid thing that happened in the past. YOLO, you only live once. You only die once. You live every day. You ever hear that? There was a lot of arguments back and forth from this, and all of them were dumb. I can't lie. But I can tell you right now, you have one life to live, and it does have an expiration date. So how will you live that life? That's what I took from this story. How will you live that life? Because at the end, we all have the same ending. We do not all have the same life. We can make different choices, some bad, some good. How will you live the life up until, and then he died, and then she died? Do you have passion? Do you have something that you've actually discovered that you like to do? Or are you just working for a company 9 to 5, and then you go to bed, and then you go work for a company? You had a little bit of fun in between. You went on a couple of vacations. You made some money. You had a family, and then you died. What are you doing in that? On a tombstone, it has your birth date, and then it has the day you die. And then there's this dash in between. There's a poem that's written about it, and I can't remember it right now, but it basically asks, look, there are 2 dates on your tombstone. Both are important, but the most important thing there is that dash. How did you spend that dash? For me, I almost didn't record this podcast. I'm going to be 100%. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're like, wow, it looks dark in that room. And I highly suggest, please check out the YouTube video. I can't believe I actually recorded it. I almost didn't. I made a lot of excuses on why I wouldn't. Life got busy, didn't want to, whatever. And I'm tired. It is 10:46 p.m. on Tuesday night as of this recording. I'm releasing it tomorrow at Wednesday, which would be your today while you're listening to it. And I almost was like, no, I'm going to bed. And here's the reason why. At work, I've been doing a 5:30 a.m. shift. That is an early shift. That means I have to get up at roughly 4:45 a.m. And yeah, I don't take a lot of time to get ready because I also don't want to leave too early. I am getting up so early, and I'm exhausted by the end of the day. I usually get off around 3:30, 4 p.m. So we're talking nearly 12-hour days. And I have been so wildly busy that I'm like, all right, you know what? We're going to have to skip this week's podcast. But I've committed to myself to make a podcast and to get that YouTube video out. So here I am at 10:46 p.m. and I'm going to hold true to my commitments. And the reason is I don't want people to be able to look at my dash one day and say, oh yeah, Easton, he said he would do a lot of things, never did, never committed. Instead, he went to work and then he was too exhausted to do the things he truly wanted to do. So he never did them. That's a shame. His expiration date came and he never did what he said he would do. So here I am late at night recording this podcast, exhausted. I will go to bed right after I edit this because I refuse to spend my dash doing nothing. Everyone has an expiration date. How will you use yours? That's point number 1. Everyone's life has an expiration date. And I want to say I got that from Genesis chapter 5, the most boring chapter in the Bible thus far. And we'll get to that in a moment. But let's get into how you spend your life for a second. Point number 2. Do not let jealousy control how you spend that dash, how you spend that life. There's a chapter right before 5, and you guessed it, it's 4. Chapter 4 talks about Cain and Abel. And this story of Cain and Abel, this is Adam and Eve's sons. Cain was a worker of the ground, right? So he would produce fruit, vegetables, all the good stuff. While Abel was a worker of the field. So he would produce, he would get the cattle and the sheep and the livestock. So they would sacrifice to God, right? So Cain would take his fruit, the best of his fruit, vegetables, whatever. He would take it and he would offer it before the Lord. Well, Abel would offer, his fattest calf or a lamb, an animal sacrifice. God preferred the animal sacrifice over the sacrifice of the field, right? The vegetables, the fruit. And to be honest, I get this. Look, I was vegetarian for like 6 months, and if someone said, hey, I'd like to offer you some berries or a steak, yes, I would also choose the steak. I get where God's coming from. God said, I prefer the steak. All right, so I would too. But this made Cain very angry, and he was actually very jealous of his brother Abel. So what does he do? He asks Abel to come out to a field with him, and then he kills his brother out of jealousy because he couldn't stand that the Lord preferred Abel's sacrifice over Cain's. That's what point number 2 is all about. If your life has an expiration date, and we're talking about how you spend your life, what I want to bring up is and what I want to make a point of is do not let jealousy dictate how you spend your life. And the reason this is so relevant right now is because we live in an age of social media. Back then, in biblical times, clearly, it was, oh, my sacrifice wasn't as good as yours. That makes me mad, so I'll kill you. While today, we all we have to do is pull out our phone, and we have Instagram and social media, TikTok, all these social media apps, and instantly we can see all these people that have cleaned up their photos and have beautiful filters and all these things, and we look at it and go, I'll never be that pretty, or I'll never be that fit, or I'll never, whatever it is. I'll never have that many followers or that many listeners. And we get jealous. Now, today's a little different. You're not going to go out and kill someone over that, but you do let it stop you from having the life you want, because you look at that and say, I'll never get there. And that jealousy will halt your life. Even though you have it in you, even though you could get to that spot, it's that jealousy and that hopelessness of, wow, I wish I had that. And then you get into this depression and you don't move forward. Don't let that put the brakes and a halt on your dash, on how you spend your life. So number 1 is your life has an expiration date. Number 2, do not let jealousy dictate and control that dash and how you spend your life. Do not be like Cain. Do not look at your brother or your sister and get jealous of what they've offered or what they have, what talents they have. And number 3 is this, and this point doesn't come from a story or lesson in the Bible. Instead, I had to learn this point by actually reading the Bible, and that is, if you want to find the wisdom of the Bible, if you're looking for what the Bible is trying to tell you, sometimes it's not what the Bible says, it's how you read it. Because I'm telling you, when I read chapter 5, I was like, ugh, I don't know if I can get through the Bible. It was getting so boring. I checked my phone multiple times, even when I had no new notifications, which is most of the time in my life. I opened the phone and I just started getting on Instagram. And then I'd close the phone, I'd read another line, and then all of a sudden, anything would happen. I would just glance at my phone. I'll open it again. Who knows, right? Maybe someone texted me, even though there's no notification on there. It was wildly distracting having anything around me because it got so boring in chapter 5. Point number 3 is this, though. If you want to know something, if you want to know what the Bible's trying to tell you, if you want to know what wisdom the Bible's trying to put upon you, sometimes you need to change the way you read. For me, it was finally noticing the pattern. I had to pray. I was like, God, what do you want me to learn here? Because I'm not learning it. What is it? What do you want me to see? And so I read the same line multiple times and finally realized, oh, and then he died, and then he died. I found a pattern. And from that, it totally changed my viewpoint of, okay, I guess I'm doing a whole other podcast episode on something I didn't think I was going to talk about. I thought I was going to skip chapter 5. But it showed me, and God showed me, that we do have an expiration date. So change the way you read the Bible. If you truly want to know what's in this book, and you truly want to know what God's trying to say, or what people find so interesting about it, why are we living according to this book? Where's our morality come from? Pray and actually truly read and look for the patterns. Sometimes there's a lot of symbolism in this Bible, and that's good. That's okay. You got to want to understand what it's saying. And if you don't, if you just kind of try and skim through it, you're just kind of reading it to read it to say, oh no, I read that, you're going to miss it. You got to want to know what it's actually saying. Look for the patterns, look for the wisdom, pray about it. Honestly, Jesus says this later, but this is true. If you seek, you'll find. If you ask, you'll be answered. And if you knock, the door will be opened for you. It's there. Y'all, those are our 3 main points today. Number 1, your life has an expiration date. Number 2, don't let jealousy control how you spend your life up to that expiration date. And number 3, if you want to understand what's in the Bible, then actually read it and pray and look for the pattern, look for the wisdom. If you seek it, you will find it. And that's all for today, y'all. Thanks for joining me. As I am exhausted, you could probably hear it in my voice. I am so tired. I hope you got something from this podcast episode today. And I will talk to y'all next Wednesday. Please make sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast. It really helps me out. You can find everything I use, from the mic to the camera to my iPad, all on my Amazon storefront. Check that out. It's all in the link in the description below. Again, I will talk to y'all next Wednesday. God bless.